Hello, this is just a short explanation as to how we teach writing in Beech Grove. We use a process called Talk for Writing, which is basically the idea that children will talk about a story and learn a story by heart using a map as well as actions to really enhance their writing when they come to write their own stories. So children internalise, they get to know the story inside and out before they even start writing. So the way we do it normally is we start off with what's called a cold task. Now a cold task is where we ask children to write a story without us having taught them anything about the story type. So each story has a theme. The theme might be fairy tales, it might be a losing tale where the character loses something, or a finding tale, or a journey story. Many stories fit into these different types. And children will then just write their version without any help from the teacher. They just write whatever they like, and then the teacher will use that then to see what they then need to teach in the next 3 or 4 weeks' work. So we start off with the cold task. Then the next stage is called the imitation stage. Now in the imitation stage, it's normally a few sessions where children will really get to know that story almost off by heart. They'll use their story map, which helps them, which is just a symbol, it's symbols to guide them along their story. And they'll get to know that really well. They might use actions to help them to remember the story, and then they will also do drama activities in class normally, but maybe even at home, which would be wonderful if you could do that with them. Use drama to remember the story, use actions just to memorise stories, just like young children do, all the way up to rather longer stories. Up near year 6 we have slightly longer stories that we then try. We don't memorise them word for word, but we remember most of the phrases, and we'll use the map every day to try and remember each phrase and all the different sentence types. And when we've internalised the story, when we've really got it off, in our heads, we then start to use sentences, use the sentence types, retell certain parts. You might practice all the speech, you might practice the different types of the sentence, like using the adjectives in the way that the author has. This is we call it an imitation stage. So you're imitating the writer, you're trying to do a little bit of your own version, and then you're going to be able to use those ideas. So you might have a setting description that you could then use in the second part of the whole process. So you start off first of all with your cold task, then you go into your imitate, you're doing small sentence, short burst writing activities, just short bits of writing, maybe a few lines, maybe just a sentence or two down in Key Stage 1. Then we go on to the middle section. Now this is called the innovation stage. Now an innovation is basically we use the same story type, but we change aspects. Now some children will change lots, some will change just the character or just the setting or just the time of day or just certain words. That's absolutely fine, depending on their ability. So this is where we pre-plan it, and we rethink the story in our own way. So we will, as a class together, plan it the first day, then start the innovation. Now the innovation is where the teacher will do shared writing. They will help the children by giving examples on the board, and they will write the story together with their own innovation. So they'll use their own ideas that they've planned the day before. So the character, one child might have a character who's a boy, one person might have a character that's a dragon. They use their character within their innovation. So it's still the same sort of story, it's still a finding tale or a losing tale, whatever type of story it is, but it starts to become the child. The child begins to take ownership of that story. And when they've done that whole innovation, and that might take up to 5 or 6 sessions, depending on how long the story is and how much the teacher wants to put in, they will have included all of the aspects of the story that we call a toolkit. Now a toolkit is just aspects of the story that we'd like to include, that we'd like to teach. For instance, it might be a certain sentence type, it might be speech, it might be the use of the apostrophe. We'll make sure that all of that grammar and all of those sentence types are included within that teaching at that point. So hopefully the children will have practiced it many times, internalised it so they really know the story well, answered lots of questions. We do a session called Read as a Reader, where we answer questions, a little bit like reading comprehension. So we will look at the text and ask certain questions about it so the children really feel they know that story. Then we start to change it and innovate it for ourselves. And that's where the teacher does every day shared writing, and you can be watching the videos as that happens. And when all of that's done and the children have finished their innovation, they finally get to do what's called the hot task. Now the hot task, and that could be a few days later, the hot task is where the children are left alone and they're told, go and now write a completely original story of your own. You don't have to follow the same characters or the same setting or the same plot. It can be completely different, but can you use what you've just learnt within your own independent writing? And that's basically Talk for Writing. We do lots of talking about it, lots of understanding, lots of getting used to the story before we write. So the children are really sure of what they're talking about, what they're writing about, and really feel they know the characters so well that they can then go and use it independently, completely on their own.